So the story starts when the story starts in 1919 with the advent of the Economic League, one of the main blacklist organisations set up specifically as an anti-communist operation with assistance from the state and the private sector. It kind of starts in 1972 with the building workers strike, a successful strike which convinced construction companies that they needed a better way of monitoring those who were involved in this kind of action. They used the Economic League, they used something inside the Economic League called the Services Group as a particular way of monitoring activists within the construction industry. And it starts maybe in 1983 when the Economic League folded, and then the Services Group was set up on its own as a very discreet blacklisting operation. Based in, of all places, Droitwich in the West Midlands. You wouldn't think that's being the heart of the capitalist beast, if you like, but it's very discreet and it performed its job very well, very efficiently, until 2009, when the Information Commission's Office raided the premises of this organisation, the Consulting Association. They found out about this organisation because of an article I'd written for The Guardian in 2008. It's the first bit of luck, really, and one of the things through this story, I think two. One is about luck, and one is about perseverance. The luck bit is the bit that suggests to me where things have kind of gone wrong, because it required luck in some ways for the Information Commission's Office to find the headquarters. Because if the article I'd written to The Guardian about blacklisting and about suggesting a pattern of misbehaviour hadn't landed on the desk of an investigator at the Information Commission's Office, he wouldn't have started investigating, maybe even off sick that Monday morning. He wouldn't have looked at it and thought, this is something I need to look at. And then 9 months down the line, he finds a consulting association. A guy called Dave Clancy, he's Greater Manchester police officer. He had a warrant. They went into this building in Droitwich in the West Midlands. And inside is a chap called Ian Kerr. He's in his kind of late 50s. He's an ex-school teacher, a bespectacled, very kind of demure kind of guy, and 3,200 files collected over the previous 16 years, in fact some stretching back to the 60s, on union activists which they had monitored and surveilled by the construction industry in all that time. 3,200 files, and a unique glimpse, to some extent, into the surveillance by corporate operators into those they consider a danger, a threat to themselves. And what was it that made these people worthy of investigation? Dave Smith can tell, because he was one person of files, and the first thing on his file probably is a good suggestion about what that was.
Phil wrote the article in The Guardian in 2008, and it took nearly a year from the article that Phil wrote until the ICO raid. And then when they raided and went into the offices, what they found on the desk in this place was secret files that the big construction companies were keeping on trade union members in the building industry. There's 3,213 people whose names are on this list. And if you think your name's on the list, because the ICO is a government department, you can write to them, and if you can supply them with sort of proof that it's you, if they've got a file on you, they'll send you a file in the post. And my file is 36 pages long. It's got my name, address, national insurance number, the car registration I drive, my home number, my mobile phone number. It's got every job I worked in a 10-year period recorded on it. It's when I complained about the toilets overflowing on a building site, that's written down there. When I gave out a leaflet about asbestos on a building site, that was photocopied and sent to my file. Like, this is the kind of thing he's given out on building sites. When I was elected as a safety rep, so the files come, and what you see when you read the files is between 95 and 99% of them are all to do with people who are actually a trade union member. If you got elected as a shop steward, that would be written down. When I was elected as a safety rep, what normally happens is the union sends your credentials to the company, and that's meant to give you certain legal rights as an elected representative to walk around and raise issues about health and safety on behalf of the workforce. What actually happened was I was sacked almost immediately, and then the credentials that were meant to give me these legal rights were photocopied and sent and added to my file. So just for being elected as a safety vet was enough to get you put on this list. And more that you see, it's to do with people raising concerns about health and safety, or the very first thing that's on my file was in 1992, where we were in a dispute about unpaid wages. It actually says on my file, in dispute over the facts of several weeks unpaid wages. So because we had the tenacity to actually say, hold on, we've worked here for a few weeks, well, I haven't been paid for it, that was enough to be added on your file. And the point is, it wasn't just keeping a file on you, because if all they were doing was keeping a file, it's a bit sad, but it's not really impacting on you. But the point is, they weren't just collating the information, they were using it for a very specific purpose. And we know this because there's been a select committee investigation and it's all come out. And what we know is, when they did the raid, as well as the files, they see some invoices as well. So how it worked was, this organisation was set up by the big multinational construction firms, not the small little fly-by-night builders, the big multinationals. So Sir Robert McAlpine, Balfour Beatty, Vinci, Carillion, Kears, Costains, Lang O'Rourke, all the companies that everyone's heard of that are sort of plastered everywhere. They had meetings once every 3 months. You could only attend the meetings if you was at director level of the company. And if anyone applied to get a job on any of their building sites, what they used to do was they would send up via the director, normally the director of HR or personnel or the industrial relations manager at the most senior levels, would send up a list of all the people applying for a job to this centralised organisation. They would flick through all the names, and if your name came up on the list, you got a message back and they basically sacked you, or didn't give you the job. And to give you an idea of the scale of this, every time they checked a name, it cost £2. And when it got closed down when they were building the Olympics, and Sir Robert McAlpine built the Olympic Stadium, and the last invoice for Sir Robert McAlpine was £28,000. This is, what this isn't is a couple of sort of managers having a chat in a pub and sort of some kind of informal process. This is a very, very systematic, paid for, invoiced mechanism to keep trade union activists off of their building sites. And it's done by the most senior directors in multinational construction companies. And the effect, of course, is a very simple operation. Send for a fax, a list of names, telephone call, don't employ that person or sack that person. And because they never ever thought that this stuff was ever going to be found, they're quite blatant about it. Every time someone was sacked, it was recorded in your file. So some people's files are 50 pages long. And it's like page after page of name checked, turned down for a job, name checked, sacked, name checked, with telling you which companies were sacking you and all the rest of it. I mean, it's absolutely blatant the way they were doing it. And the effect is very instantaneous. You go from being fully employed. Most of the people they tended to be on this list tended to be quite competent at their job. I mean, you weren't being sacked because you're no good at your job. You tended to be the people who are a bit more conscientious, if anything. Look, this is unsafe. With asbestos, we shouldn't just be chucking it in a skip. We should actually bring in the people who are meant to do it. Because of that, it obviously affects their profit margin, which is why they want to get rid of us. But for us, you'd have years and years of full employment. As soon as you're on this list, suddenly you're out of work for not just the odd week here and there, but because these are the biggest companies that controlled the entire market. And they weren't just employed, I never worked for any of these companies directly, not one of them. I was always coming in via an agency or via a subcontractor, and they were, because they're so big, they were actually filtering out anyone applying for jobs on that level as well. So the effect is for lots of people, massive cuts in their income, long periods of unemployment. Some people have lost their houses over it. A number of people have been divorced for it, and a few people we know on the list have committed suicide. I can't say that it's everything to do with their suicide is to do with the blacklist, but long periods of unemployment during the middle of a building boom when everybody else is working and earning a lot of money can't be good for anybody's mental health. So that's what we did. And
So what we had access to for the book was the files which had been seized by the ICO and the documentation that they'd seen as well, the invoice book, the sales book, the constitution that they had. This was a properly organised outfit met regularly in various spots around the country. And as Dave said, each company had its own main contact at director level, who was the main contact with Chamberlain Association. Its knowledge was kept compartmentalised. It was quite discreet within each company as well. So quite a few people in the company would have no knowledge about how this operated, but a very effective surveillance system. But you would think that once the files are released, that you'd have an easy case under employment tribunal for wrongful dismissal. This is quite clearly a breach of law in terms of being discriminated because of your trade union activities. So in 2009, the files come out, and a number of cases, I mean, we're talking about hundreds of employment tribunal cases are lodged, and a whole load of them are sent to Manchester for one kind of hearing, because there are so many of them, they want to kind of deal with them all in one go. And the judge makes a quite devastating ruling. There's a law, for those who are aware of the employment law, it's not an area of my specialism, but you've got a time limit to bring a case, 3 months. So you need to bring a case within 3 months, otherwise you're out of time. Well, as Dave was saying, some of the stuff in his file was back to the early 1990s. It's not just 3 months, it's not even 3 years, but it's decades out, but you've only just found out about it. And the judge ruled that all of these cases were out of time. All of these cases couldn't even go to court because they were out of time. So of all the hundreds of employment tribunal cases filed, only a bare handful ever made it to court. Dave's actually one of them. It went to court, Carillion, on the grounds of wrongful dismissal. And how did Carillion use the blacklisting file? They presented it in evidence of their own case. They didn't just deny it, they presented it in evidence of their own case, because they said, absolutely did we do it, but it wasn't us because Dave was employed by an agency, and employment law in this company, in this country, you have to be directly employed to bring a case. Since he was employed by an agency, he's not covered by it. Okay, we're talking about something about 3 cases, I believe, have actually been successful. All the hundreds and hundreds, not even heard by a judge. So this is the first kind of bit. We're talking about the legal process, a bit of legal balance, if you like, is not being done. So when Michael Meacher was talking on back there about the failure, this is one. The failure of any kind of judicial oversight. So far, we've got no employment tribunals. In Kerr, the person in charge, was prosecuted under the Data Protection Act for not handling data correctly. He wasn't prosecuted for blacklisting because blacklisting wasn't illegal. Okay, this was a surprise to a lot of people at the time. It should have been illegal in 1997, but the Blair government went out to consultation, and they asked companies, did blacklisting occur, and should it be made illegal? And the company said, no, it doesn't happen, so therefore you shouldn't make it illegal, so they never made it illegal. So it wasn't actually illegal to blacklist someone anyway, because it didn't happen, yet we have all this evidence that it did. 2010, the final days of the Brown government, blacklisting was made illegal. Kerr's fined £5,000 for breach of the Data Protection Act. He didn't pay it. McAlpine's paid it for him as a way of keeping him quiet. It was paid secretly by his daughters to him, so he didn't actually pay. The only person so far, since 2009, who has suffered in any way some kind of being back before a judge in any way. A number of people were forced to give evidence for the Scottish Fair Select Committee. There's just that one person, even he didn't have his fine paid yet, covered by the corporations themselves. No one, there's 3 people have had some success at the employment tribunal and none of the others. This is a kind of shameful indictment in the way that something could be brought to light and yet nothing happened. And one of the things we start to chart in the book is about what else the files tell us, what else is there, what other kind of information comes out. And one of the interesting things is that there are a number of women on the files, which is odd because women are well represented in the construction industry, and yet there are some kind of 200 women represented on the files as well. And as part of Dave's case against Carillion, he was given access to the files to look through, and in fact he came across someone that he knew, a teacher from North London, who has an entry on this file, which is kind of odd, since why would someone have an entry on a construction industry file as a teacher in North London? And piecing together some of this evidence, piecing together evidence of Dave Clancy from the Information Commissioner's Office, who said that according to his reading of the files, there was information there that could only come from police sources. There is files in there which say this person is under official watch. There are files in there where it says about police stopping someone, you get no record made, and yet somehow it ends up in the files. And we've got hundreds of people on there who seem to be on there for their environmental activism, because they are journalists working in this area, because they were politician campaign around environmental activists as well, that are coming caught up in this construction file. So it seems, as we started to look at the evidence, that it was widening out, not just from a corporate spying onto union activists, but actually something about a state and corporate monitoring of activism overall.
Yeah. And to roll on from Phil's point there, people have all seen on the news this undercover police officer, Peter Francis, who's gone on record to say he spied on the Stephen Lawrence family. I knew Peter Francis back in the 90s. When I knew him, his name was Peter Black. And he ran around doing anti-racist campaigning with me. And we have shown, in fact, Phil, because Phil, being a proper investigative journalist, gets to talk to undercover police officers who've turned whistleblower, and showed him the Blacklist files that we thought had some information provided by the police on them. And one of them was a bloke called Frank Smith, who's a good friend of mine. He's a bricklayer from Liverpool. And another one was a woman called Lisa Torsha, who was Frank Smith's girlfriend. She's an American citizen. And Pete Francis, when he looked at the files, went, some of the stuff on this Blacklist file is word for word what I put on the special branch file about these two people. Peter Francis admits that he was sent in specifically to spy on Frank Smith because of his anti-racist campaigning. Lisa was an anti-racist campaigner. He admits that he was asked by the Home Office and MI5 to find dirt on Lisa Torsha in order to try and get her deported from the country. And Lisa Torsha never worked in the construction industry ever in her life, has got a Blacklist file supposedly compiled by the construction industry, but quite clearly coming from the police. And to be honest, when this first started off, this was about big business and trade unions, but the more we've done digging, the more that you see the links with the police is really, really obvious. One of the women who spoke on that film we showed there earlier on is Helen Steele. Most people probably have heard of Helen Steele, but if you haven't, she's in the 90s. She was a member of London Greenpeace, and she gave out a leaflet about McDonald's, basically saying McDonald's is terrible for the kids' health, they're destroying the environment, their workers' rights record is appalling, blah, blah, blah. All things that nowadays everyone would take completely as obvious, you know. McDonald's sued London Greenpeace. And so Helen, basically, Helen and Dave Morris, who's another bloke who's on this Blacklist, defended himself in the High Court. It was the longest running court case in British legal history. It was called McLiable. It's a sort of set text for anyone doing law courses now. You know, they ended up winning in the European Court of Human Rights and all the rest of it. Complete disaster for McDonald's. And Helen Steele is on this Blacklist file. And boy, she's a gardener who works for the London Borough of Haringey in North London. Why should she possibly on there? Well, lo and behold, do we think that the police had anything to do with it? The bloke that Helen Steele was living with for 3 years during that time, they were going to get married. She knew him as John Dines, and she knew him as John Barker. His real name was John Dines. He was an undercover police officer sent in to spy on her. And more of these undercover police officers have come out. After Peter Francis' deployment finished, this new bloke turned up at union meetings that I knew. I knew him, his name was Mark Cassidy. I went to union meetings with him, I've been on picket lines with him. Some of the union meetings, the bloke chaired the meetings. His real name is Mark Jenner. He's an undercover police officer from an organisation called the Special Demonstration Squad that was sent in to spy on union activists. And so the link between them and the police and big business, is really, really clear. And it could be even clearer. This is about as good as I get with PowerPoint. You know, they're putting that out. But John McDonnell, who, let me just do a plug for the book, okay? John McDonnell wrote the introduction to the book as well, so we're whatever happened to him, you know. The first ever meeting we had of blacklisted workers, there was probably more people in this room than the first ever meeting we had, and John chaired the meeting. So there was about, I don't know, 8 of us. John McDonnell chaired the meeting. Ever since then, that was the formation of the Blacklist Support Group, and ever since then, John has chaired all of our meetings and attended every single one of our AGMs and meetings that we have in Parliament quite regularly. About a year ago, John McDonnell named Detective Chief Inspector Gordon Mills from another one of these undercover police units called NETCO. It's the National Extremism Tactical Coordination Unit. And I know they're all a lovely mouthful. This DCI, remember we said they had these secret meetings once every 3 months that you could only attend direct? He attended the meetings. When I say attended the meetings, he gave a PowerPoint presentation at the meetings. You know, if you're a DCI doing a PowerPoint presentation to directors of multinational companies, and we've seen the stuff in the PowerPoint presentation, it talks about how you need to be checking to make sure people don't get jobs, and when the periods to look out for, and all the rest of it. Extreme left wing is the sort of terminology they use. If a DCI gives a PowerPoint presentation, that's not corruption. That's not like in phone hacking where they've all been given backhanders. That's standard operating procedure. That's been minuted. There's a report been written about that meeting somewhere. But so far, of course, none of the reports and none of the stuff from the police has actually been given to us. So there's this public inquiry that's going on at the moment. It's called the Pitchford Inquiry. Theresa May set it up about a few months ago after the revelations about spying on Stephen Lawrence. And pretty much all of the women activists that had undercover police officers living with them, the Lawrence family, lots of deaths in custody families, lots of families who are fighting for racist murders. Instead of the police going out looking for the murderers, what they did was send someone undercover to come and spy on these people, and us as well as trade unionists. We've all been granted what they call core participant status in this public inquiry that's going on at the moment, because they've already admitted that yes, we have spied on you, and the inquiry is to try and find out what was going on and why they were going to do it. Of course, a big surprise, sort of warehouse loads of documents have all been destroyed and can't be found, and Phil put in freedom of information requests for some of this stuff, and we didn't get very far with it.
Well, I mean, one of the things is about all of this that we've been able to piece together the last few years, and this is driven by the Blacklist Support Group, okay? With support from Unite and GMB and UCAT and UJ as well, but this is primarily about those who are effectively kind of driving the campaign. You think back to the end of 2009, Ian Kirby prosecuted. There was very likely to be a law in the next few months making it blacklisting illegal, and the story to some extent was over and done with. There've been a couple of newspaper reports, and that's about it. And where we are now in terms of how far we've come. So last Friday, just before kind of May Day, it was announced that a civil court action brought by the Blacklist Support Group was getting a cost of construction companies in the region of £250 million. In terms of a civil court action that's brought against them because of the operation of Blacklist. Okay, so there was there was no state prosecution of them because they hadn't broken the law or anything else. So it was up to the works themselves to bring their own court action, and it's forced them to make payments as well as legal costs. And the majority are getting above 250 million. So that's the kind of stuff that we've gone in so far. The Pitchford Inquiry, the Blacklist Support Group is a core participant. In other words, it's ironically the government is paying for the lawyers of the Blacklist Support Group to investigate the government for monitoring the Blacklist Support Group. There's a nice irony there about it all kind of going around in a beautiful circle. But about how far we've kind of come with the story in some ways. But this based on on the files we've got so far, the fact that we've spoken to special branch officers, we've spoken to industrial relations officers at these corporations who talk about regular meetings with special branch. We've spoken to obviously those affected by the files, also those who had carried out. So I've interviewed the bookkeeper for the Consulting Association, interviewed the industrial relations officers as well. All this based though on about 5 to 10% of the information the Consulting Association held. Back in 2009, when Dave Clancy went in, they had a warrant issued by a court. It was the first time High Court would issue such a warrant for them to go in unannounced to metaphorically kick the door in, if you like. And the warrant was worded in such a way that Dave Clancy interpreted it very cautiously, shall we say. And of all the information in there, he subsequently said they took maybe 5 to 10% of what was there, and the rest they left behind. And Ian Kerr had it burnt in a field 3 days later. So all of this, what we've been so far, is based merely on a kind of glimpse, a kind of a pulling back of the curtain, a few pieces of the puzzle, if you like. So you think about what else we might have seen. We know there are files missing. All those environmental activists that are on the list. And there was one that revealed last week. He teaches law up in Glasgow. He had notification literally last week that his name was on the list because he defended people who were campaigning against what used to be the Criminal Justice Bill back in the 90s, a particular piece of legislation that a lot of people were upset about. He defended those. His name's on the list. He teaches law now in Glasgow. There's a former lecturer in the oil industry up in Glasgow called Charles Wolfson. He's on the list, and his file says about the possibly withdrawing funding from the university if he keeps on writing books about health and safety and Piper Alpha. There are journalists on the list. There's a photographer from London called Molly Cooper who's on the list. There's Mark Thomas, the comedian activist, on the list because of involvement with anti-dam protests and Balfour Beatty. We've only had kind of a glimpse, if you like, for some of these files have never been found. We've just got the names there, but nothing else. So we've only had that kind of stuff. So this is what we've been able to piece together that raises serious questions, I think, about the way the state and the private sector operate on their surveillance, their taxes, if you like, for those that they would deem some kind of threat in some way. But I would say, I mean, just the end for me would be that if there are still people make applications. If you think you might be on the list, you can ring the ICO, and if you have kind of prove it, they can send you a copy of your file. You can use the Data Protection Act to get information about anybody that holds information about you and see your own kind of file. It's called a subject access request. It costs £10. If you wanted to find out, if you're a student here or you work here, what Goldsmiths information they have about you, or your doctor, or anything else, and you can make that subject access request. And I think that is something which more people should be doing to be able to kind of find out what this information is. I don't have a blacklist file, of course, at all, but I did send off to the construction companies to find out what information they had on me. They'd paid some poor sod a few quid to kind of check my Twitter feed and things like that as well. Kind of good luck to them. Langer Rourke, though, had an internal file that said I was an individual to watch because of my involvement with Dave Smith and dedication to unions and a strong ability as a freelance journalist to make his voice heard, voice and opinions heard. And that cost me a tenner. We use it as a testimonial in the book, so I think that was £10 well spent. There's a serious point about using that mechanism if you think that someone's got something on you, and the NUJ have been doing some really good work about getting people's access to their files. You might have seen this stuff, say, with the Green MP, Karen Lucas, getting access to her kind of files as well. The book is very strong in not having people as victims. Actually, this is a book about the triumph of the support group, enforcing this story back onto the agenda, enforcing some kind of accountability. And I think people can take heart from that, and also from the fact that they can see some of that control back from them as well.
Let's wrap up. It started off as an industrial relations dispute. It's now turned into a human rights conspiracy, if we're honest. Between big business and the state, spying on not just trade union activists, but pretty much anyone they deem as a sort of threat to them. There's a number of members of the Scottish Parliament who actually appear on the Consulting Association blacklist, and the British state holds this thing called the Domestic Extremism Database, which have got members of the House of Lords on it, for God's sake. You know, Jenny Jones, Baroness Jenny Jones, actually. I've done a number of speaking things with her, and she gets a domestic extremism database out. And when people first hear that, you imagine, oh, Jenny Jones, I bet he was a right rascal in your youth. You know, no, they started it when she became a member of the House of Lords. Not from, literally about 5 years ago, when she got appointed to the House of Lords, is when the police actually started spying on her. And so, yeah, it's we don't like the word victims, because I don't consider myself a victim. I'm a trade unionist. We think we can change the world and improve things, and that's what we're trying to do. Thank you very much for coming on a lovely, lovely sunny day to come and listen to us speak. Thank you very much, and we'll take questions.
Is this kind of quarter two? So you've got use the team accordingly.
Yep.
You mentioned the links between the police and the Consulting Association. I wonder what evidence you have of links between private intelligence organisations run by people like Evelyn Le Chen and people like Paul Mercer, and then the link they have with the Consulting Association.
Yeah, I mean, there's been quite a lot. There's Evelyn Lubers, who's a researcher at the University of Bath, is independent now. Has done quite a lot of work in that area. Evelyn Le Chen was spying on the campaign against the arms trade, I believe, exposing the kind of Sunday Times. There's a kind of very fluid network of people with different experiences and backgrounds. That's more of a kind of. I mean, some of them were relatively naive. Some of those anti-kind of subversive groups, and the way they're kind of set up, and others are a lot more effective. It certainly seems to have been, from the 90s, a splintering of operations. A lot of people setting themselves up with some kind of police background and doing kind of service checks on people, or offering to do kind of infiltration stuff, because that seems to be the period when everything suddenly flowered in terms of the interest in there. The Newbury bypass was the first bit where the police and private detective agencies worked quite closely together to monitor each other. So we've not seen, the Consulting Association was actually quite a tightly run operation, in the sense that literally it was a family affair. Kerr employed his wife and kids kind of working and stuff as well, and kept it quite discreet in that way. They were looking about passing it on when it got raided anyway, and it probably would have tried to maintain very discreet and closed off, partly because the construction companies themselves wanted to kind of keep close control over it. So because we haven't been able to kind of get everything, it's unclear about who else they may have kind of linked up with. It's more likely to have been by the industrial relations officers and their kind of general discussions and who else they've linked up. I think those relationships between special branch, where they would have been talking to all of these kind of groups, that's where the nexus would have occurred, if you like. Actually, Consulting Association on its own was a very tight, sealed off operation, if you like, in some ways, kind of getting information out. But Kerr kept himself to himself, which is why he had the job and was employed for a number of years. He was very good at keeping quiet, keeping his nose clean. But certainly, campaigning against the arms trade is one of those groups which has suffered because of that. Because of that infiltration. Indeed, I think Mark Thomas's book Cuckoo, isn't it?
Yeah.
His play about that is about that, the effects of that infiltration as well.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that's going to help you. But.
Yeah, the Evelyn's, whatever her name is, I can't say, Lechen's organisation is called Threat Response International, TRI. Evelyn was originally from security services, British security services sort of background. But one of the other directors of TRI was the bloke who was the deputy director of MI6. And they leave that, and then they become private organisations spying on activists and giving this information or selling this information to big business. I mean, they're quite old about it. There was another organisation called Caprim, which spied on activists, and they gave evidence at the select committee, and they talked about. They gave a list of all the big companies, Glaxo's, SmithKline Beecham's, that they sold information to, and the link between the police and big business is just so obvious when you look at all the people who've gone from the security forces into really senior positions in multinationals. So, Assistant Chief Constable Anton Setchel, who was the person who was in charge of all of Britain's undercover police spying on activists. He was above Special Branch, he was above the Special Demonstration Squad, the MPIU and NETCOs. He was the most senior police officer in charge of spying on activists. When he retired, he's now the head of global security for Lang O'Rourke's, one of the big blacklisting companies. You know, I mean, the links couldn't be really more obvious. And some of the undercover police officers have actually gone into academia. We're in a university. Some of them now teach in universities all around the world. One of them, just down the road from here, Bob Lambert, is a professor teaching. Apparently he dresses himself up as a liberal academic about Islamophobia. But Bob Lambert was the undercover police officer that actually wrote the McGlybel leaflet. You know, the longest running court case in British legal history was actually written by an undercover police officer, the leaflet. There's a police investigation at the moment into an event that happened in the 1980s where a bomb went off in Debenhams in Harrow and burnt the department store to the ground. The Metropolitan Police are investigating at the moment because it's been suggested by Caroline Lucas in Parliament that Bob Lambert was the person that planted the bomb, the undercover copper. Bob Lambert, one of the women that he was spying on for a number of years and lived with her, once again lived with her for a number of years, they had a child together. He was already married, but in his deployment, in his undercover thing, he had a child with her. When he left, abandoned the child, they've just paid out Met Police have just paid out £425,000 to the woman because of that abuse. You would think that the British state would be appalled by that man's record. When he retired, they gave him an MBE. You know,
Bob Lambert.
Bob Lambert MBE is his actual name. And so look, the links between big business and the police and security services is like a spider's web.
So I'm trying to establish what you think the reason. When you talk special branch, usually think town. That's what special branch. But I'm not sure. Were they interested in saving money by spying on people that might cost the corporation money through getting things right, through protecting people? Or were they interested in infiltration to find out who might be extremists? I'm trying to work out. Is this guy filming? So, is it? In your opinion, was it about money, profit, or was it about working with the state to try and identify extremists?
Motivations. Well, there's the kind of the formal notification that Peter Francis was talking about being prevent some kind of threat. They would be preventing some kind of threat of civil disorder or disturbance, and that would be the justification. Why?
Now the building companies, I think, is purely to do with profit.
Oh yeah.
You know, that's 100% to do with profit. Yeah. It's if you slow down their building side because
you're all particularly associated with big building companies.
Yes.
So that was about money.
Yes.
That was about economics.
And I think, it's important to make that distinction about those on the files. Those people on the files, some people on the files, are there accidentally. You might have, if you wrote letters in a paper, you would be pictured on a picket line, something like that. You might be ringed in the file. This is, Bob Jones, that kind of stuff. Sometimes they got that wrong. They ring the wrong person. There are names on the file people don't exist because workers would have used pseudonyms to get jobs. So the number of those kind of ghost files, if you like. There are people on the files who have kind of slightly random reasons, if you like. So I think there's a kind of full spread. It's not as if everyone, but there was an intersection between those people who are particular interested in this, such as Frank Smith, involvement with militant and with anti-fascist activity, is a flagged special branch. And there's some of the questions still being teased out is how much was about the industrial activity doing, how much was other political activity that also made them of interest.
Anything in the file picked up by I forget the organisation that ex-school teacher worked for, that would suggest the amount of money that was being saved by the corporations for paying £28,000 to deal with it.
That's one of the reasons, to be honest. These kinds of questions is one of the reasons we're asking for there to be a public inquiry. There's a public inquiry into undercover policing, And to be honest, this story about blacklisting with big business, you know, the court case that Phil talked about, which is meant to start in the High Court actually on Monday, but literally the week before they've bought everybody off. You know, I mean, the British legal system works in such a way that if you're offered a certain amount of money, your lawyer says to you, forget it. Even if you want to go to court, you're not allowed. You know, because the way it works is if they offer you a certain amount, the only outcome in a civil case is financial. No one can be sent to prison, so the only outcome is financial. And the lawyers work out a range of sort of likely levels of compensation. And if the other side offer you a certain amount of money and the lawyers think this is more than you're going to win in court, then the way the legal system works is you have to take it. Because if you don't, even if you go to court and you win the case, you know, you have to pay the other side's costs. Well, the other side's costs at the moment is running at, you know, more than £20 million. It's just astronomical. You know, and so literally, whether completely reluctantly, all of us have had to sort of settle. You can't imagine the amount of arguments we've had with our lawyers, you know, but we've had to settle. And what it means is all of these, you know, directors of multinational companies. One of them, his name's Callum McAlpine. He's the actual owner of Sir Robert McAlpine Limited. He was the man that set this organisation up in the first place. He was the man who paid £10,000 to buy an existing blacklist from the Economic League. He was the man who provided Ian Kerr, the person who was doing it, with a Mercedes from the McAlpine's carpool. You know, I mean, when he gave evidence at the Select Committee, the MPs asked him questions and he kept saying, I'm refusing to answer that because of the High Court case, refusing to. So it's just like blankly refusing to answer even MPs. And now, because of the way the system works, he's effectively bought himself off from having to give evidence, you know, in the High Court, which is why we want this is why we want a public inquiry. You know, it's not just about the money. It's never been about the money. It's been about exposing these people for what they do. And the other point is that, you know, the British media is fantastic at looking overseas and talking about Russia or China or the Middle East or wherever it happens to be, and talking about human rights abuses and dissidents being spied on by the secret police. You know, that'll be all over. You know, the BBC. The BBC have never run this story. You know, have hardly run anything on this. You know, and yet we've got secret police units that spy on activists in this country. It's called Special Branch, it's called MI5, it's called Special Demonstration Squad, it's called GCHQ. That's what they're doing, not spying on people outside. Them organisations are specifically tasked to spy on their own citizens, you know, and yet this never makes the media. You know, that's one of the reasons we're doing it, is to try and expose it, you know. So, sorry,
It's 5 minutes to, so...
Yeah, and anyone else?
I thought the helpline was going to be in court in June, and you explained a bit about that, but also that it was going to be accompanied by fresh documents. And you said that stuff had been burned 3 days after the raid. So where has this news sort of come from? Like, what do you? I don't know how much you can tell us about kind of what's going to come. If it's tricky.
Just because at the moment, this Callum McAlpine that I was talking about, he's due to give evidence in the High Court on the 22nd of June, because there's been a witness summons order forcing him to come and give evidence. He's not going to end up giving evidence because of this, you know, this way of buying people off. Because literally the court case is meant to happen on Monday, and it won't be happening on Monday, you know, because of what's happened literally last Friday, yesterday. And yeah, new evidence is coming to light all the time. They have destroyed evidence. I mean, part of the disclosure, this Callum McAlpine was the founding chairman that set up this consulting association. And all of the companies, because of the High Court case, have had to disclose any documents that relate to this blacklisting operation. And McAlpine's was the founding chairman and ran their finance committee for a 16-year period. And to date, not a single letter or email to and from McAlpine has been released to the court. And they've admitted, because they've discovered what happens to all these letters. Oh, by mistake, loads of them were all burnt and shredded on a certain day. It's just like, I mean, seriously? You know, I mean, come on. And then one of the things that we're already compiling is a dossier of all the documents that they've destroyed. That once, if it don't go to court, we're just going to fire in something on perverting the course of justice, and that is a criminal thing. And you know, if they end up going to court because of perverting the course of justice, well, that'll do me, you know, well enough as well.
No, I mean, that's fine. But, just be sorry that because I mean I think something the same way McAlpine paid off Ian Kerr, went £5,000, you know, just kind of keeps going. Kerr made them a lot of notes and stuff. They've got this thing on the day they wrote, didn't it, of head guy at McAlpine saying, you know, keep our name out of it, destroy everything, and all this kind of stuff. And you know, there's been that desperate rearguard action, talking about coloured money, but they're paying quite a bit, which suggests about how desperate they are to kind of not have that exposure, how much they will pay out. But then these are multi-million pound companies. Skanska is a huge operation, Balfour Beatty and stuff. This is, you know, on a balance sheet, how much are they willing to spend to kind of keep it out? I think it's of interest. One of the things that's happened over the last 6-7 years is that more than 100 different councils have passed resolutions saying they're going to refuse to give public sector contracts to these companies unless they say they're going to behave in an ethical way. That's where it's hitting them, is the fact that I think Islington was the first place who withdrew a contract from Kira, I think it was, to say we're not happy with giving the public funds. You think about those, the amount of public sector contracts now going to these corporations, and yet we should have some kind of say about how we want those contracts to run. So they are being hit in kind of different ways, and it's been quite interesting that as they've expanded out, so they've also probably found themselves more exposed in other ways, in areas which they fear the most, which essentially is their kind of bottom line. So, you know, there's a way to go yet.
And if you could give up for dealing with Bill, it'd be great.
Thank you very, very much.